And you can't hear me right now at all? Can you hear me now?
Nothing.
Really? Test.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now I can't hear anybody, David.
Hey,
Oh, you can't hear?
Stephanie, can
So
you hear
maybe
me
it's
okay?
just me.
I can hear David.
Okay,
David,
great.
you sound a little far away. Let me adjust my volume and just.
No,
I
that's
can hear you
that's
now.
just my microphone. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, we're figuring out some technicals on, I guess, Matt's side.
And I know we've been a little out of the loop with Sarah Lee out, but I wanted to share with both of you, we've still been building our Innovation Cluster Accelerator here in Washington State.
David, can you hear me okay?
Oh, one second. Yeah, I can hear you, Matt. Can you hear us?
Oh, I think he's still having audio issues.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's great to hear. And it's nice to meet you, Stephanie. I don't think the two of us have met yet.
Yes, I
Oh, there
haven't
we
been
go.
on these calls. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we continue to support our 9 early stage innovation clusters, and then we're just launching a application this week to start working with some more like rural and regional innovation cluster, like very early stage, to help them start using some of the tools and strategies that we're learning. So we're really excited to respond to this RFI based on our lessons learned over the past 2 years, because it's been learning curve like this for sure. Sometimes I joke I need a kindergarten teacher on my team, because it's all about getting people to bring their toys to the sandbox and play together.
Yeah, well said.
Which we don't do well here in the US. We've learned a lot from some of our Nordic partners in particular about how to play nicely with our competitors.
Great. Well, can you hear me okay, David?
Oh, yeah.
All right, great. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm Matt Bogoshian, Executive Director of the American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative. And the purpose of this AMCC briefing is to help all of us understand and provide info to the federal government about how they ought to plan and design the Tech Hub program, the Regional Technology Innovation Hub program. We're recording this so we can share this with others. And as you all probably know, the $10 billion Tech Hub program was authorized in the CHIPS and Science Act signed by the president last August. That was modeled after the IMCP initiative, the Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership Initiative. And many of the stakeholders who were involved in IMCP from 2014, 2015, and 2016 helped form AMCC and inform the development of the new CHIPS and Science Act and the new laws, specifically the Tech Hub program there. The first tranche of $500 million was appropriated to EDA for the Tech Hub program. So they're now asking in this RFI, the request for information, they're asking the public how to design the use of that funding. So AMCC plans to provide a response, and we're asking you to help us do that by giving us your take before the deadline of March 16th. We also want to encourage every region to submit their own input directly to the request for information. So we thought as soon as this thing came out, it would be smart to just get something on the calendar. We could record it and share it, just to go over the questions. And as you'll see in this 30 minutes, we're gonna go through some slides with all the questions on there. Our operations director, AMCC operations director, David Van Sicklen, put together this slide deck directly from the request for information. We thought, to provide feedback, we, all of us, we don't have to respond to every question, although in this case, I suspect AMCC will, but just don't be intimidated by the scope of these questions. There's a lot there, and they're pretty, demand some pretty complex responses. So anyway, we're all in this together, and we've got to kind of understand the questions first to provide adequate responses informed by our collective experience here. So these responses, as I said, are due March 16th. So that's why we scheduled this session as quickly as possible. Like I said, we're recording it, and we plan to, share this recording in our weekly AMCC update that goes out at the end of each week. And we also plan to continue the discussion on those AMCC Monday calls. The next Monday, we're going to have an extended session for that purpose. And again, this session is just to review the questions. So we hope it spurs discussion at the end as I go through this, and hopefully your regional organizations and networks in the coming weeks will result in input to both AMCC and directly to EDA. So David, why don't you get the slide deck going?
Yep.
Thank you. So you can see that. That's just reiterating. So the overview there, and $10 billion authorized, $500 million appropriated, comments due March 16th. Next one. So this is this is kind of the overview section, which is important to keep in mind as AMCC and or your region, your organizations and your regional network respond. These are the top priorities. So there's 20 some odd questions, but keeping these priorities in mind is important in answering, I think, all of them. Enabling technology and innovation, critical to national and economic security, support regional economic development, resilience, including in small cities and rural areas, promoting increased geographic diversity, promoting the benefits of tech development and innovation for all Americans, including underserved communities and vulnerable communities, and support the modernization, expansion of U.S. manufacturing based on advances in technology and innovation, support domestic job creation, broad-based economic growth, and improve the pace of market readiness, industry, and maturation. Okay, pretty humble priorities here, right? Yeah, so very daunting. Next slide. So let's go into some of the input options. So again, we're recommending you provide feedback on your own, individually, collectively through your regional networks, and in multiple from multiple organizations, and then or you can provide direct input to AMCC to inform our response. So that's a hyperlink, right, David, in there. So you can just click that to get to the RFI on the federalregister.gov. And let's go to the next slide. So we're going to go and just briefly touch on, go to the next slide if you would, these questions. And at the end, so I'm going to go through all of these, and then at the end there's a chart with all of them on one slide, which I think will hopefully we get through the questions, and then we'll have a little chance to discuss them. So they packed a whole bunch into this first question. kind of tricky here. So what are the Ndc of Success for a tech hub? So defining features of a region that indicate a tech hub will take hold. Well, yeah, that's a complex question right off the bat. And how will we know if tech hubs succeed? They have a later question talking about kind of what's the timeline, the temporal piece of that. Is that success in the short term, medium term, long term? So some of these questions, as you'll see, are linked very closely with one another. The next one is what existing assets and resources generate support and enable technology innovation, demonstration, and deployment. And how does a tech hub leverage those assets? So that's one of the things that many regions around the country and IMCP have learned about this collective impact bottom-up strategy. So I suspect we'll have some good information there. When designing tech hubs, what additional geographic, demographic, or place-specific factors of data should EDA consider? Now, if you recall from the tech hub program that came out, they have regional diversity built into the program. And so that's already baked in the cake to some extent, but there's other factors that they would like to consider there. So I think that's a good question there. The next one, D, is are there specific metrics that EDA should consider for designating tech hubs? So that's a challenging question. We have used as a template for metrics the Big Six. Is, as you know from the IMCP initiative, the 6 key areas for a thriving manufacturing ecosystem that we have been using to work on a metrics project. So we have something to say on that one. E, what are the technological considerations that EDA should consider? Yeah, that's a big fat question. We've talked about key industries, and this will come up in other questions that the White House supply chain reports came out last year about 6. We've identified as 6 kind of key manufacturing industries: defense, energy, transportation, agriculture, IT, and health. But there are a lot of technological considerations too, of course, and we have the 16, 17 manufacturing USA institutes, for example, that are focused on particular technologies. So, and there's many more others to consider, but I'm just kind of teeing up some things that we all have collectively been working on in response to these good questions. Next slide. The tech hub characteristics they're asking about: how might EDA determine the size and timing of investments? There's the temporal piece there. How will it accelerate a future tech hub's evolution into a global leader in an industry of the future that strengthens its region? What data and information are important to that determination? What are historical and existing examples of successful regional hub programs, and what can be learned from these examples? So those regions that have been doing IMCP and other kind of bottom-up initiatives like it, that's a great question to respond to right there, based on what you've learned. That's I'm glad they've asked that question, because that makes it relevant for so many folks around the country that have been working on this bottom-up model. The next question is, how might EDA determine the relative competitiveness of proposed tech hubs in the context of current and future global competition in addition to domestic competition? That's interesting, albeit challenging question. Next one. Next slide, please, David. So now this is on questions on models for program design. Please share specific examples of evidence-based or evidence-informed investments, interventions, or policies. I see in the bold there, evidence-based or evidence-informed investments, interventions, and policies. I'm reading into that, of course, that in a complex systems science, which is really what this is about, it's going to be hard to have clear causation, but the evidence-informed investments, interventions, and policies, its correlations between these investments, interventions, and policies and the outcomes we're trying to elicit is certainly something that we're working hard on. It says, so back to that previous question, what are examples of what's worked, including those implemented in other countries? I heard in the pre-call from our friends in the state of Washington that they're learning examples from some of the Nordic countries. I think that would be a good opportunity to share what's been learned there and from other places around the country or from around the world, but also in your own regional examples. Yeah, what these examples would do to support technology-based economic development, particularly at the scale required to enable U.S. leadership in technology. The sub-questions here, what limitations currently prevent EDA from investing, intervening, and making policies in these ways? So we also have a lot to say about that. Of course, one of the strengths of the American system is it's decentralized, and of course that also the other side of the sword there is that it prevents a lot of challenges there. So there's a lot to say there. And are there other federal organizations that have overcome these issues? That's a good question. And I hope that elicits a lot of response there. Next slide. Again, these slides, they're all going to be on one slide at the end, and we'll have hopefully a few minutes to talk about it. RFI questions on models for program design. Are there specific workforce and labor development, business and entrepreneurial development, tech development and maturation, or infrastructure activities that EDA should emphasize through the program? We talked about the big 6 items there. How should EDA consider worker and community input in the tech hub design? What are some of the most innovative approaches to commercialization at research institutions? What evidence exists on the effectiveness of these approaches? And what are some of the most innovative approaches to ensuring the growth of globally competitive industries in an inclusive and equitable manner? So your examples out there, I think, will speak to that. Go ahead. Now, regarding funding and support, so this gets at these competitions. So many of you around the country have been involved in these kinds of regional competitions, going back to IMCP, but there's been many more, and many are happening right now. The Build Back Better Regional Challenge, the NSF Engines, the DOE LEAP program, and many others. So what have you learned from this process? And EDA wants to know, how should EDA evaluate the extent to which certain technology and innovation sectors are critical to national economic security? How should EDA take into account whether a consortium would help promote increased geographic diversity of innovation? That's a really interesting question. We've talked amongst AMCC stakeholders about kind of a tech hub and spoke approach to bring rural, suburban, and urban neighbors together, because we can't have a tech hub everywhere, but in a hub and spoke, we can have, a greater geographic diversity that way. How can federal designations and federal grants be structured to maximize the desired impacts of tech hub program? What are other existing federal programs can complement tech hubs? That's a huge, super important question. I think that we all can speak to your capacity to even know about the different programs that are coming out from different agencies is taxed. How can those be more effectively woven together is a really compelling question. That at least the barrier could be spoken to by ourselves and by regional coalitions. In addition to existing federal programs, what types of benefits or support could be helpful for designated regional tech hubs? So that gets at impact investment and lots there. Okay, next slide. What should EDA consider in designing the program for its current appropriation of $500 million? So this gets at a real a challenging question, right? It's a $10 billion authorization, but only 500 million has been actually given to EDA for this. So, you know, we're expecting and hoping and we'll be arguing that the evidence supports continuing appropriations for this, but you know, how should those, you know, the fact that there's only $500 million right now affect the design of the program? And so, fair question. How should EDA evaluate the effectiveness and return on public-private partnerships or other collaborative arrangements that it may emerge? What criteria should EDA use to shift investments within or between tech hubs to maximize the impact of the program? So this gets at the sharing between tech hubs, and I think IMCP and AMCC and many of the region, they have these EDA communities of practice where they're sharing going on from region to region. I think the criteria, you know, for shifting investments, I'm not clear exactly what they mean by that, but I think to the extent that that enables more sharing, I think that would be a good thing for the strength of American manufacturing writ large. What else should EDA consider when building this program, including but not limited to alignment with other federal programs? So that's kind of an open-ended question for folks. Next slide. This set of questions is about program administration, about measurement to outcomes. This is a big topic. What are Ndc of Success? That gets back to an earlier question. What if any earlier in time proxies are predictive of those indicia? Yeah, and that's a good question. I think that recognizes that is that we don't have, you know, exceptional tools, you know, to demonstrate definitely the causation between these activities and the outcomes. Certainly there's correlations, and we might have to, or we're definitely going to have to be using some proxies so that we can have more confidence in the you know, in the wisdom of those investments. What is a realistic time horizon over which to evaluate? I've referred to this earlier here, the temporal piece to it. Is it 5, 10, 15 years? Good questions. We can try to respond to there. Next slide. What desirable organizational institutional changes within and among Tech Hub participants could the Tech Hub programs competition incentivize? How could these changes be incentivized? So, you know, as we've talked about before, this is a lot of behavioral science in terms of getting people rowing in the same direction. So your experiences there can speak to that question. How can EDA ensure input from engagement with community members in the administration of the Tech Hub program, particularly for underserved community members? That's an excellent question, because we don't want this to be just about those who have a lot of experience in this kind of bottom-up model so far. What are unique challenges faced by established program to stimulate competitive research? So this is a state-based this is a program. Just Google that. You'll learn more about that. We can provide more information to inform a response to that question. Next slide. So this is the chart I was talking about. And we're only doing 30 minutes here, but this gives, you know, kind of the big picture of all of these questions. So thanks, David, for putting all of this into a PowerPoint so that you can see kind of the range of the questions. And as we talked about, many of them are related to one another. And if you or your organization or your network is thinking about responding, I hope you respond. You don't have to respond to all of these questions, right? You can just respond to one of them. You can respond to a handful of them. You can share information that you think is responsive to one or more of them to AMCC, and we can take that in evaluating what would be an appropriate response for the organization. So let me stop there to see if there are any questions, comments. We have a few minutes, and this is just an opening salvo to share with others and get people thinking about how to respond. So let me stop to see if there's questions, comments. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello, I was waiting to see if anybody else would have questions first, since I'm the new kid on the block. But for those who don't know me, I'm Stephanie Scott. I'm with the Washington State Department of Commerce. I work with Sarah Lee, who is out right now. And we've been building our Innovation Cluster Accelerator over the past 2 years. I lead that program. And I will just say that I was really pleased to see the questions that they're asking. It shows me that they're coming from a place of curiosity. We have learned a lot as we built our program over the past 2 years. Innovation clusters are tech hubs. It's just different terminology for the same economic development concept. And so I think we have a really great opportunity to help EDA understand the relational dynamics between our stakeholders in our industry ecosystem. I love that you brought up behavioral science, Matt, because that's one of the biggest things I've learned over the past 2 years. I joked that I need a psychologist and I need a elementary school teacher on my team. And that's not to make light of anything that we're doing or any of the stakeholders that we're working with. It's just that this model requires a level of collaboration that doesn't naturally happen across our ecosystems. And so we need to think about that in terms of how much time it's going to take to build these tech hubs, that it's not something that just happens overnight. And so Washington State will be leading what I expect will be a full response based on our experience with this program. And then we're holding a webinar tomorrow, similar to this, with all of our stakeholders across the state to help kind of walk them through whether they want to respond or be a part of our response. And then additionally, I am on the board of directors of the TCI Network, which is a global innovation cluster organization that serves the global cluster community. And our board of directors is considering a response to share global best practices and recommendations for building a program like this. So lots coming, but I really appreciate your leadership in getting us started on having a group discussion, and would love to be part of further chats about this.
Great, Stephanie. Thank you for participating and speaking up about the importance of this and your own experience. I'm super excited about what your state is doing, and I hope other states, around the country do the same thing. Matt Fieldman, I see you on. There were several questions there about workforce. I hope you guys are going to put together a response to this. I think that's super important. And any other people that want to who are on this call that want to speak up before our time? We have 3 minutes left here. Want to be respectful for folks' time. Like I said before, we're going to have an extended. AMCC has our weekly national call on Mondays at 11:30 Eastern time for 30 minutes. We're going to extend next Monday's call for 30 minutes at the end to continue this discussion. So we'll have further information about that in our weekly AMCC update. Any other questions or comments about what's going to happen next? It's great. It's great that we're not going to be intimidated by the scope of the challenge. This is a challenging set of questions to respond to, but delighted that we have a lot of experience in this space already, and encourage everyone to find the time to inform EDA about what happens next, because it'll have ramifications for years and years to come, how the design goes on this thing. So super important. Anything else, David, that we should be covering here?
I think we've got a good foundation right now, I just want to echo a couple of things that Stephanie touched on. One is, of course, I love the phrase that you used, the relational dynamics being so important. In the statute of the Tech Hubs program, there's a whole section on collaboration and how the Tech Hubs will work with each other, sharing best practices, but also working with other federally designated communities. I think that's an area specifically for AMCC to respond to, but it's also something that all of the people here can also include is that important element of sharing those best practices among the different tech hubs. I also think that both the geographic considerations and the temporal ones are something we should dig into further on our next call, right? They're asking about how we have inclusive and accessible competition, specifically targeting regions that have generally been underserved with these type of federal designations and funding assistance. But they're also talking about having 3 hubs per region. So I'm guessing that needs to be some sort of, based on their EDA regions. So there needs to be some sort of input there on how they're going to manage this competition through that framework, that they want to have 3 tech hubs designated in each of the 6 regions of the country. I think that the temporal question is also something that we should talk about. They have in the statute a 2-year minimum before an evaluation period and second round of funding. And 2 years, I've heard in other programs that it can be a struggle or a challenge for communities to actually begin implementing their project and then having something to show for with a 2-year time frame, and then having to go and already prove out that they've made impact going for a second round of funding. So I think that we should talk about how our communities feel the time window should look for subsequent rounds.
Yeah, great points, David, and lots more to come. Thank you for sharing those initial thoughts. So encourage folks to chime in to David and I. I think the next slide has some contact info, right, David? Yeah, there's our contact info. If you're not signed up to the AMCC update, it comes out every week. We'll send out more information on that. You can just send us an email. We'll get you signed up, or you can go on the website, americanmcc.org for that. And also next Monday's National AMCC call. Again, we'll have an extended 30 minutes to continue this discussion. We appreciate those of you that are on the call and look forward to our next interaction. Have a good week.